Good afternoon, brethren. It is, reiterate what Mark said about the feast. It was absolutely lovely this year. We had great weather. Couldn't ask for better weather. The day we left, we walked out, got in our car, and the temperature dropped like to 60 degrees. So it was like held out for the whole time we were there. Absolutely beautiful, 85-degree weather. Just enjoyed it very much. And going to all the sermons and all of the services and all the activities, we were a little worn out by the time the feast was over, and driving back, Judy and I were, it's like we had to come home to get some rest because we were up at 7 in the morning and up till 10:30, 11 at night in some cases. But we had a great time. It was a huge success, and the people that I've talked to, especially last night on the podcast, I talked to Dr. Ricks, and they had a great time and huge success out in Myrtle Beach and at Branson. I did want to mention John Mitchell, too. I know that he got sick at the feast and had to leave on the last day, and just prayer request for him. Hope that he's doing better. I hadn't got to talk to him, but certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to him. But I hope you had a good time and a good feast, and we got to get back to the business of doing the work of God here and continue on for the rest of this year. And I'm excited that the magazine is about to come out. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I mentioned on the podcast last night all the calendars and literature that we send out every year. You know, down there in Panama City, we have a foyer out there. It's sort of an angle foyer there where the people come in before they walk down the hall and go in the big meeting room. We put all kinds of literature out there, just a big array of the DVDs and the literature that we have, and that thing, it gets cleaned off. I mean, almost every night we come in and it's somebody's ransacked the place, and there's literature gone, and people are picking up things all the time. And I wanted to get one of the little booklets we have that's a statement of beliefs, and I went down there. It was about 11 o'clock at night. I just got through visiting with someone late, and I was looking for one of those books, and they were all gone. So I hope all of that literature makes its way into the hands of people that will really look for it. And I met a lady there in the lobby one day, and she's telling me she asked me what we were doing there, and I told her, and of course her husband was continually walking down the hall. He was completely not interested in it, but she was excited, and I invited her to come, and I don't know if she did or not, but I hope she did. The other thing is we hired a guy to build sandcastles down there, a big sandcastle for us on beach day. And I'll tell you this story because we asked him in his sandcastle to put, ICG, FOT, PCB, which is, Intercontinental Church of God, the Feast of Tabernacles, Panama City Beach, Florida. And anyway, he looked at it, he said, "What's FOT?" And little Sonia. It's like my kids, I look at my children and I say my kids, and they're in their late 30s. But she came and told me the story. The guy said she told him that it was the Feast of Tabernacles. It's biblical, and we do this in observance. And the guy said, "Well, I consider myself to be a Christian man, and I've never heard of that." And I told Sonia, there it is. How many times do we have to say it? How many times do we have to scream to the top of our lungs that we're observing the Feast of Tabernacles, a biblical observance that was observed by the ancient Israelites and by those that came back after the destruction of Babylon, and they returned to Jerusalem to rebuild it, and they kept the Feast of Tabernacles, that Jesus kept the Feast of Tabernacles, on and on and on. Apostle Paul kept, the Pentecost and the Days of Unleavened Bread and all of those, and yet people seem to be completely ignorant of the fact that it even exists. It marveled. I just sat there and I said, "Can you believe it?" I just can't believe it. How are Christians to survive? How are we to survive in a world that's I'm just going to say not gone mad, but going mad? We stand here on the brink of an economic collapse in our country, and people are riding along acting like nothing's ever going to happen, and they're throwing money around like there's no tomorrow. And I'm specifically talking about our government. Our country has made pacts with former enemies. We're in bed with ungodly nations. We're seeing ties of long-standing industries here in our own country. We're leaving or cutting ties with industries here in our own country and going out our lovers abroad, as the Bible terms that, that he warned Israel about going after their lovers, these foreign nations, and making pacts and trade agreements with them. The influx of migrants, I really don't have to comment on that. They come into our country with no resources, no education, no contribution to society other than to drain an already burdened health industry, and of course the welfare provisions, and gobbling up the labor force, which once sustained our citizens, our children, our progeny. And the very lifelines of our society are being dismantled. And I want to, I can mention this because I'm in the industry of the oil and gas, and of course the coal industry that I'm not in, that provide electrical power, energy to drive our nation, to provide heat and cooling for our homes. Isn't it wonderful? You can go over there and turn the switch on. We have nice, cool air coming in here as a result of low, inexpensive electricity that is provided for us by some of these coal-fired plants or natural gas-fired, clean-burning, plants. And yet they want to destroy them and dismantle them. The automotive industry is also following suit with its green initiative. I can't believe, really, that the auto workers' unions all across our country, who hold a great deal of power, haven't stood up against this policy. I mean, can you imagine the jobs that will suffer as a result of the green initiative in the automotive industry? I mean, we're talking gasoline engines, internal combustion engines that they're planning on doing away with. How many parts and pieces go into making of a car? How many vendors, how many manufacturing facilities that go upstream from that? Thousands, you're talking thousands of pieces that go into the making of a car, and they're going to do it all away and put a battery in there? Why hasn't the auto workers union stood up to this? Because they're going to lose a lot of manufacturing jobs, I believe. I mean, the assembly lines, all we got to do is have a plastic car with a battery in it and one guy plug it in. Think of all the people and the families that are going to be affected, and not a single word out of them. But by the hundreds and thousands, they will be affected and put out of business, I guess. The huge monumental shift in the Great Reset and the Green Initiative, which should take place over decades, be examined, be tested, and ensure its stability and the benefit to society, is being forced upon us at rapid pace, and I'm going to mention that in a minute, upon our people and on the world. It's not that we have to do it 50 years from now or 75 years from now, but they want it done now. They want it done next week, next year. It's becoming extremely difficult for the oil and gas industry, for example, to get financing for its R&D, research and development. We had to, in our company, find another entity that would finance, and that means drilling, fracking, and developing new sources for oil and gas. And, that's the blood of our society, oil and gas, I believe. The financial institutions, therefore, are on board with the maddening idea that we can somehow save the planet and all you got to do is pick up any of these industries or these big corporations and the associations that they belong to and read their literature. And therefore, we must wreck every long-standing industry, the ones that made our country so unique and so great, and also provided the conveniences that we have for a happy and enjoyable life. I mean, I love my life. I love the fact that I can get in my car and drive over here to church, and I don't have to get a wagon and, 3 hours later show up here with sweat dripping off of me and, the smell of, what on me. Isn't it wonderful that we live and we can get a gasoline out of a pump and we can drive to Panama City, Florida in one day? Be down there in 12 hours or so enjoying the countryside. Or we can drive up into Colorado, as Judy and I did several years ago, and roam through the mountains and explore and just enjoy the beauty of God's creation and see the vastness of the beauty of our country. Most people don't even get out of their city, much less their own county. And there's so much to see right here in the state of Texas. We've been all over it. I love going up in Arkansas. We went all over the state, the state parks up there one time. I've been in Oklahoma. I've been in, I don't know how many states now. It's not all of them. I think there's only 10 or 12 or maybe 14 that I haven't been to, and I want to go see those next, maybe, if I live long enough. You know, the internal combustion engine is in airplanes, it's in cars, boats, yachts, construction equipment, mining equipment. It's in the oil and gas industry and the production equipment. And we're talking also about military hardware, generators for hospitals, electric power plants, coal mining, down to your lawnmower and your chainsaw. I don't want to give up my chainsaw. I love to go out in the woods and working on my fence row, take my chainsaw out there and cut up a little log or tree and pile it for brush. I love to get my lawnmower out. Sort of love my riding lawnmower because it's a time that I can get on it and I sort of meditate. It's like a game. I go round and round and I hate that part. But while I'm going around, I'm thinking about things. You know, I'm sort of meditating. I'm sort of zone out from work and life and all of those things. And when I'm done, there's this beautiful lawn. And it's like the feeling of accomplishment. You're going to take that away from me for this green initiative business? And yet, for the most part, these major industries are seeking net zero world initiative. And by the way, their explanation of this is rapidly achieving energy system level decarbonization. That's their description of themselves. And who's on board? Well, the Import-Export Bank, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of Energy, the U.S. Department, the State Department, I should say, the U.S. Energy and International Development, the Treasury Department, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. That's just them. When you go to the World Economic Forum and look at their webpage, it'll scare you to death. There are over 700 and I think 80-something members now, and they're attracting projects and countries from all over the world. You know, Klaus Schwab is promoting this ESG criteria, which is environmental, social, and governance, which is going to affect every aspect of your life, from the environment to how you behave, where you go, and, of course, how government mandates all of these things. A move towards globalization and equality. And go look, if you don't believe me, go look at the list of speakers at their last forum and their last meeting and look at the subject content of it. I won't go into all of it, but it's everything from, you know, gender equality to, you know, the doing away of oil and gas industry, the new fourth, you know, they call it the fourth, fourth industrial revolution. You know, a complete reset of society. And they almost pulled it off when COVID hit to try to reset our society to one that's going to be a digital age. It's going to be digital money, and they're going to have even more control. I saw one statistic that said 6,000 people could control 6 billion people on the face of the earth. That's the very elites controlling the masses. And you find yourself a drop in the bucket. I mean, you're a needle in the haystack in the population who is going to be forced to do their will, their bidding. Anciently, there was a rebellion in the nation of Israel that I believe left a great many people bewildered and wondering how they were going to survive. How can we survive as a just and God-fearing people? You know, the fact that Mark said you can't even read your Bible now. I mean, I remember you being on an airplane at times when I was traveling a lot between the feasts, and I'd pull out my Bible and be working on my next sermon or my next place to speak. And people look at you sort of strange. Well, I wonder if that's a religious fanatic. I wonder if he's a weirdo. I wonder if he's got a bomb in his suitcase. Because you have a Bible in your hands. Unbelievable. And even though it was in the pages of ancient history, I believe we can glean from its story how we could navigate a world gone mad or going mad as they move at lightning speed away from God. We go to 2 Chronicles, the 10th chapter. 2 Chronicles, you know, the Bible has two lengthy lists of the kings of Israel and Judah in 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Both of them carry, you know, a great deal of weight, have enormous historical value. We find out that a rebellion occurred, and I want to begin in verse 1, 2 Chronicles, the 10th chapter, verse 1. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for to Shechem where all Israel come to make him king. This is Rehoboam. You know, there was David, and then there was Solomon, and then his son David's grandson, Rehoboam. And it came to pass when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was in Egypt, whether he had fled from the presence of Solomon the king, heard it that Jeroboam returned from Egypt. Jeroboam, you remember in the days of King Solomon, God was angry at King Solomon. Later in his years, he began to marry all of these foreign wives, and he brought in all of their foreign culture, and he began to build these little tempietos or whatever to all of his foreign wives. And God was angry with him because he did it, because he was drawing the people away from God, and he was, subjecting the nation to all of these foreign religious, pagan religious observances, which God condemned. And so because of that, God said, I'm going to rend the kingdom out of your hand. Not all of it, but 10 tribes. And he told Jeroboam, you remember the prophet came up to Jeroboam and took his garment and tore it in 10 pieces and said, God is going to rend Israel out of the hand of Solomon and give it to you. And as long as you're faithful and loyal, you will have that reign over the kingdom. Well, he sort of tried to take over that responsibility immediately, and Solomon sought to kill him, and he fled to Egypt, where he lived until Solomon died. Now Solomon is about to die or is dead, and Jeroboam is returning from Egypt, where the people that were, loyal to him sent to him. Look at verse 3. And they sent and called to him, and Jeroboam and all of Israel came to speak to Rehoboam, who is now king, over all of Israel. And your fathers made our yokes grievous. Therefore ease thou somewhat the grievous servitude of your father, and his heavy yoke that he put upon us, and we will serve you. Of course, Rehoboam was a young man. He was very young. He called together all of his advisors, young and old, and the old men told him, if you will do what these folks want, they will serve you and be loyal to you forever. But then along come the young advisors, said, no, let's crank down the vice. Let's put a harder burden on them. And he uses some language here I don't even want to describe, about his father. If you think my father was bad or put a yoke on you, I'm really going to make, I'm going to use, not only am I going to use the whip, I'm going to use a club that has, barbs on it or whatever. And I'm going to chastise you with scorpions, as he says. So down in verse 12, Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day after they had made this decision to meet in 3 days. And he told them that. He told them that's exactly what they were going to do. And that day, it tells us down in verse 19, Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. Israel, the northern 10 tribes, rebelled against the southern tribe of Judah. So there was a division. This is the day that the once united kingdom of Israel became 2 kingdoms, the northern tribe of Israel and the southern tribe of Judah. And some of the scholars have called Israel the apostate kingdom. And we'll look at that in a moment, why they called them the apostate kingdom. Down in chapter 11 in verse 1, and Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem. He gathered the house of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000, and chosen men, which were warriors, to fight against Israel. So Rehoboam was going to take it into his own hands to go fight against Jeroboam and take those kingdoms back. And God said, no, you're not going to go fight against him, because I promised him those kingdoms, those tribes up there. And so they didn't go to war with one another. Down in verse 5, beginning in verse 5, it tells us that Rehoboam began to build the cities that were in his kingdom. And down in verse 13, he said, and every priest and the Levites that were in all of Israel resorted to him out of all their coasts. All the Levites and all the priests that were in the northern tribes of Israel came down into Judah. We're going to find out why here. Look at verse 14. For the Levites left their suburbs and their possession and came to Judah and Jerusalem, for Jeroboam and his sons had cast them off from executing the priest office unto the Lord. In those northern tribes, Jeroboam began to fire all the people who were men of God, that were priests and Levites that taught the law. We had the responsibility of that. And he began to hire thugs and people of his own ilk, people, his buddies and his friends and lowlifes that were not good for the kingdom of the north. I want to turn here, hold your place here. I want to turn over to 1 Kings, the 12th chapter. This is a parallel of this, but I want to show you what happened, what Jeroboam did. Look what he did. 1 Kings, the 12th chapter, and down in verse 25. And Jeroboam built Shechem in Mount Ephraim and dwelt therein, and went out thence and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said to in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David? He's contemplating after he's become king in the northern tribes. And he says, if this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord of Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam. If they go all the way down to Jerusalem, they're going to have a religious fervor. They're going to turn their heart back to Rehoboam, and they're going to kill me and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So we can't have that. We can't have them go into the house of God. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. It's too far, even though we find out that one of the southern cities that he set up that calf was only about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. It's too far to go. Just stop here and behold your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So he gives the credit to these golden calves, which they worshipped in Egypt. And he set one in Bethel and the other in Dan. As I said, Bethel was right there north of Jerusalem, about 20 miles. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before one, even unto Dan. So they followed him. And he made a house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of people, and which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month instead of the 7th month, like we just observed, Feast of Tabernacles. He decided to make a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And he offered upon the altar, so did he in Bethel, sacrificing calves that he had made, and he placed in Bethel the priest of the high places which he had made. And he offered up on the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart. So here's a king standing up there acting like he's a high priest, offering sacrifices, and he ordained a feast unto the children of Israel, and he offered unto them the altar and burnt off incense. And of course, there was a very unique, something very unusual happened to him as a result of him doing that, but I won't go into that story. Back in 2 Chronicles, the 12th chapter, it came to pass when Rehoboam had established the kingdom and he had strengthened himself, he forsook the law of the Lord and all Israel with him. I don't understand this. I find this very hard to believe, that a king who was given that southern tribe, who was of the lineage of David, and here he is, after God had done everything for him and promised him that he wasn't going to destroy them, because of the promise that he made to David, that there would never fail a man to sit upon the throne. And yet here's this grandson of David who rebels against God and forsook his laws. It's hard for me to understand. And as a result of that, God sent Shishak from Egypt, down here in the next couple of verses here, to war against them and was about to overtake them. I want to go down to verse 6. Whereon the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves. So Shishak has surrounded the city. He's about to take Jerusalem. He subdues them. And it says, the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves, and they said, the Lord is righteous. And when the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, the word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, saying, they have humbled themselves. Therefore I will not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance, and my wrath shall not be poured out upon Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless, they shall be his servants, that they may know my service and the service of the kingdoms of the country. And of course, we know that he did this because of the promise that he made to David. And so they stole the gold out of the temple, and they stole the shields, all the golden shields that Solomon had made there for his army. And God allowed him to survived the deal, but he was under, for a short time, the heel of Egypt, I should say. And down in verse 16, and Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and Abiah, his son, reigned in his stead. This is the story I wanted to get to. I wanted to give you the background here. Now we're talking about the great-grandson of King David. His name is Abiah. We don't know a lot about him other than these few little stories that are here. And he was in the 18th year of Jeroboam. So now we have the king of northern tribes who's been on the throne 18 years. He's got a lot of experience. And along comes this young lad who begins to reign in Jerusalem. It says he reigned 3 years. In verse 3, and Abiah set the battle in array with the army, valiant men of war, even 400,000 chosen men. And Jeroboam also set the battle in array against him with 800,000 chosen men, being mighty men of valor. So now, if you ever thought that all Israelites are Jewish, you need to read this chapter here, because this tells us that the northern tribe of Israel was at war with Judah, who are the Jews. Israelite was at war with the Jews. Why they went to war, I don't know. Whether there was some trade deficit or whether there was some argument over land or borders or, whatever it was, alliances with other countries. But here the two tribes are at war with one another, and there's 400,000 on one side and 800,000 on the other side. And Abiah stood up on Mount Zemiraim, which is in Mount Ephraim, and he said, "Hear me, O Jeroboam, and all of Israel." I can see him standing up there with maybe a spokesman that is crying out this loud voice. "Ought you not to know that the Lord God of Israel gave the kingdom over to Israel to David forever, even unto him and to his sons by a covenant of salt?" So he's reminding him of the covenant that God made with the nation of Judah, with Israel, in David's time. "Yet Jeroboam the son of Nebat, the servant of Solomon the son of David, is risen up and is rebelled against the Lord." He's telling him this. "And there are gathered unto him vain men." My margin here says worthless, reprobates, inexperienced. "The children of Belial." Interesting term that he uses there. Later on, the Jews would use that term as a sort of an adjective for Satan himself. You remember back, you'll have to remember the story. You remember the Levite and the concubine, the story about the Levite and the concubine? And how he came into the city, and it said he was in Jebus, which is Jerusalem. And he went in, the man came out in the street and said, "You can't stay here in the streets. Come into my house." And that night, the sons of Belial encompassed the house, and they wanted him to come out so they might know him. You remember that story? Well, these are the same kind of people that is being described here in this story. These sons of Belial, and have strengthened themselves against Rehoboam the son of Solomon. Rehoboam was young and tender-hearted and could not withstand them. This gives us a little insight here of what happened to Rehoboam. He was a young man when Jeroboam tried to take over the kingdom, and Rehoboam, being young and inexperienced, was unable to withstand him. And now you think to withstand the kingdom of the Lord in the hand of the son of David, and you be a great multitude, and there are with you golden calves which Jeroboam made for your God. So he's making a proclamation, a sort of indictment of sorts, I guess, against the northern tribes of Israel. Look at verse 9. "Have you not cast out the priests of the Lord?" Here's the indictment. "The sons of Aaron and the Levites, and you made you priest after the manner of the nations of other lands, so that whosoever comes to consecrate himself with a young bullock and 7 rams, the same made be priest of them that are no gods." Later on the Roman Empire would do this. They would take these people from all of these pagan nations and set them up, make them rulers and subjugates, to try to incorporate all of them into one unified Holy Roman Empire. But I wanted to get to verse 10 here, and I got a comment here, a couple of comments I want to catch up on here. When you read this entire chapter, you find out that this is a civil war in Israel between the northern tribes and the southern tribes. I mentioned that you sort of begin to identify who Israel truly is. We find that Israel is at war with Judah, which are the Jews, because Judah was a part of the nation of Israel at one time. And when the Bible speaks of Israel, especially in the major prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel, and it uses the term Israel, they are addressing the modern descendants of Israel, especially if it's talking about the end time and it says Israel. It's speaking of the modern descendants of Israel, not the little nation that's over there in the Middle East today called Israel. That's really the nation of Judah, the southern tribes, which were there, the ones that returned after Babylon and were reestablished under Nehemiah and Ezra and Nehemiah, I should say. But down in verse 10, this is us, Father. This is us, congregation. This is us, church. This is us. God the Father is trying to tell us. And I want to read this, verse 10. But as for us, I put a square around that in my Bible. The Lord is our God. I ask you in the beginning of this sermon here, how are we going to survive? Look at what these people were facing. They were facing an army that was twice their size. A great army of vicious, heinous, wicked, evil people, even though they were a part of the nation of Israel. But as for us, the Lord is our God, and we have not forsaken him. I don't think we have forsaken God. We said last night on the podcast, we have to believe that we are God's chosen people, that we are the ones that are called out, that we are the ones that God promises that he is going to protect. And the priests which minister unto the Lord are the sons of Aaron and Levites. They're doing their work. They're doing their business. They're going about. The ministers that we have, I believe, are taking care of the business of preaching the gospel message and feeding the flocks of God. They burn unto the Lord every morning and every evening burnt sacrifices and sweet incense. I don't believe any of us are offering sacrifices, but we all, morning and evening, beseech God to guide us and protect us and watch over us, keep us safe and healthy. The showbread also they're in order, and the pure table of gold, and the candlestick of gold, and the lamps thereof, almost depicting the very light of God shining upon us every day, as depicted by that lampstand. But also that they lit that lampstand every day and kept it burning as in obedience to God's command. To burn every evening, for we keep the charge of the Lord our God, and you have forsaken him. Again, an indictment to that nation. And behold, God himself is with us for our captain. He's the head. He's our leader. He's the captain of our salvation. And his priest with sounding trumpets to cry alarm against you. In other words, we have to occasionally sound the alarm, blow the trumpet. Remember what happened in Joshua's day when they went into, the battle of Jericho, the city of Jericho. And then when in Solomon's day, when God told Solomon in Solomon's prayer, he said that these priests were to blow the trumpet in the time of war. They were the ones that were to blow the trumpet and warn the people. And in Gideon's day, again, there was another example of that. Cry aloud against you, O children of Israel. Fight you against the Lord God of your fathers, for you shall not prosper. And I say to all of these organizations and all these great big conglomerates and corporations that think that they're going to stand up in the face of God, they will not prosper. But instead of repenting, instead of Jeroboam realizing his heritage, realizing what God had actually promised the southern tribe of Judah, instead of repenting and humbling himself, he set an ambush against them, against Judah. And when Judah looked back, and behold, the battle was before and behind, they cried unto the Lord, and the priest sounded with the trumpets. They're surrounded by an army bigger than they are. The priests sound the trumpets, and the men of Judah gave a shout, and as the men of Judah shouted, it came to pass that God smote Jeroboam and all of Israel before Abiah and Judah. And the children of Israel fled before Judah, and God delivered them into their hands. And Abiah and his people slew them with a great slaughter, so that fell down slain of Israel 500,000 chosen men. Did you know that that's exactly the same number of men that we lost in our Civil War here in 1861? 500,000 men. It was a monumental war between brothers. Thus the children of Israel were brought under a time, and the children of Judah prevailed because they relied upon the Lord God of their fathers. And I guess if there's anything I could say to you today, is that in a world gone mad, in a society where things are so enormously powerful and out of our control, we must rely on God. You know, God told Jacob, I am with you. I will not leave you. Jesus said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. God told Israel in their infancy that I brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God, and you were going to be my people. And he commanded Moses at the Red Sea when the people were about to, stone him to death. He said, fear not, and stand you still and see the salvation of the Lord. Those people were ready to give up. He said, I bear you up on eagle's wings. I brought you out of Egypt, He told Joshua to be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. In 2 Chronicles, we could skip over a page or two here to 2 Chronicles 20 and read this one verse here. I like this because this is time of Jehoshaphat, who is also a descendant of David. But look what he said. We'll just read one verse here, 2 Chronicles 20 and verse 15. And he said, thus saith the Lord unto you, in the middle of that verse, be not afraid nor dismayed by reason of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours but God's. I guess we need to be reminded of that. This battle that we think we are going to have to take on is not ours, it's God's. Now we can cry out, we can warn, we can try to educate people the best we can, but we must be relying on God ultimately to save us and protect us from like a 20-ton steel roller that's coming down the highway. It'll flatten you at the first chance it gets. We have to rely on God for His protection. I could go read the encouraging words from Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel. Maybe we'll turn to Daniel. That's a really good one. I love that. The last of this, all of these prophets had something to say about the time of the end and God's protection. But Daniel, the 12th chapter, and at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time, and at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that is found written in the book. Over and over again, Matthew 24, Jesus said, Matthew 24 and verse 22, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. We had a lengthy discussion last night on the podcast about that. Is it possible for the very elect to lose out? And, we sort of toyed with the idea that if someone walks away from God and rejects God, like some of these kings did, maybe they lose out on their opportunity. But, Ken Hartberger made a really interesting point last night. He said, God's protection will protect His elect from making that mistake so that He can save them. And I thought that was well put. God is going to protect us from making a stupid move and shortening the days so that we don't lose out on our reward and our salvation. In Acts, the 17th chapter, some of these are really great scriptures. I mean, they all are, but some of them more than others. Acts 17th chapter, down in verse 28, Apostle Paul on Mars Hill. See if I got the right scripture. Acts, the 17th chapter. For in Him Paul writes here as he's preaching there on Mars Hill, "For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring." In him we live and move and have our being. I love that. 2 Thessalonians, the third chapter, 2 Thessalonians 3. I'm turning a lot faster than you are. "But the Lord is faithful, who shall establish you and keep you from evil. And we have confidence in the Lord touching you, that you both do and will do the things which he commands you." You know, the Lord is faithful and he will establish you and keep you from the evil. In 1 Peter, the third chapter, 1 Peter 3 and verse 12. "For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil." I could have went back and read the Psalms where David said, you know, the eyes of the Lord, or I think it was Isaiah that said, "The eyes of the Lord upon you. His ears are attentive to your prayer. He hears those that are righteous." I mean, it's like a one-on-one with you and with God's people, that he is concerned about you. We'll close here with a couple of verses in Revelation. Revelation, the third chapter, verse 10. Revelation 3 and verse 10. This is the letters that were written to the churches. Revelation 3 and verse 10. "Because you have kept your word and my patience, I will also keep you from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth." That's encouraging words, isn't it? You don't know. It's like the young soldier that's never been in battle. You always see this in movies. And they always ask the young guy that's there, "Have you ever been in battle?" "No." Well, they don't know how he's going to react in battle. So they're a little concerned whether that guy's going to keep, have you got my back? And the young guy is always saying, "I will do it. I will stand here. I will stand guard. I will be faithful to you." But only the battle reveals what kind of soldier he will be, whether he'll fall down in a fetal position and begin crying, or whether he will stand up and be brave and courageous and willing to die for his buddies. The battle determines that. But here God said that, he said, "I will keep you from the hour of temptation which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell on the earth." I like that fact. Revelation, the 7th chapter, for the last verse here, verse 3. I didn't go back and read to you Ezekiel either, where it says that God is going to send a writer, inkhorn, out to place a seal upon all of those that sigh and cry for the abominations that be around them, that are going on in our crazy world. Revelation, the 7th chapter, verse 3, he says, well, let's pick it up. He saw these four winds, and he told them not to blow on the earth, nor the sea, nor any tree. Verse 2, "And I saw another angel ascending out of the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea." They're about to bring about the wrath of God upon the earth. And he says, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads." And of course, these were members of each one of the tribes of Israel. And I'm sure that's speaking both physically and spiritually of those who are converted Christians. God's protection is with his people. He's promised that. He will care for us no matter how great the obstacle, no matter how great the forces that are against us, and no matter how big the armies. It is in these quiet moments, though, when we beseech our God to stand as our captain, the captain of our salvation, to be the head of the heavenly host that will fight against our foes and bring us into the land of that he has promised, the kingdom of God, with all of his saints, not missing any. Thanks be to God for his divine protection.